Oui, donc un petit peu avant la présentation de mon collègue Massimiliano, je voudrais quand même vous présenter un petit peu les différentes choses qu'on fait parce que on est assez connu, mais il y a peut-être des choses que vous connaissez. Donc, alors, je vais pas tout passer, mais voilà, juste cette petite slide où on présente un petit peu la taille du TUV SUD. Donc, c'est 150 ans d'existence, c'est 1 millier d'emplacements dans le monde, de filiales et autres, 26 000 personnes. Alors, toutes ne travaillent pas, un chiffre d'affaires de 2,9 milliards d'euros. On fait quand même encore, toujours aujourd'hui, énormément de notre chiffre d'affaires, 60% en Allemagne. Donc, c'est pour ça que je suis là, pour essayer de développer le marché en France, et j'ai d'autres collègues ailleurs en Europe et dans le monde. On est indépendant et impartial, on délivre tous les ans dans différents référentiels, 670 000 certificats, et donc on offre pas mal de services. Alors justement, voyons un petit peu ce qu'on fait. Donc, dans le domaine médical, on n'est pas 1000 seulement aujourd'hui, mais 1600 personnes dédiées à l'activité du dispositif médical dans 14 pays dans le monde. Donc, vous avez la liste des pays ici. On fait tous les dispositifs médicaux, faible risque, risque élevé, les produits combinés, etc., etc. Donc, origine animale, les logiciels, tous les dispositifs, on a tous les codes dans nos désignations, à Munich, dans un autre organisme notifié aussi également au Danemark, et on fait de l'admin. Alors, on peut intervenir à différents niveaux, dans les pré-tests au départ, et puis jusqu'à la suite, évidemment, on va faire les audits de suivi, donc tout au long de la vie de votre dispositif médical, ça balaye tout. Je passe très vite. Là où je voudrais m'arrêter, c'est sur cette partie peu connue, c'est sur ce qu'on couvre en matière d'essais. Donc, ça peut être donc la sécurité électrique, l'ACEM, tout ce qui est radio, batterie, la cybersécurité. Dans la partie biologique, tout ce qui est implants, stérilité, etc., on fait des essais de biocompatibilité, on fait des essais de microbiologie également. La caractérisation physico-chimique selon la 993-18, le packaging également, et puis on détaillera ici la certification. On a aussi donc sur ces deux familles de normes, toutes les normes particulières, les règles particulières de sécurité, toutes les séries des 601-2, quelque chose. Voilà, donc ça brosse un petit peu l'amplitude de ce qu'on fait en matière d'essai, et c'est surtout ça dont je voulais vous parler, parce que là-dessus, c'est vrai qu'on n'est pas très, très connu éventuellement en France. Voilà, ici, on balaye les différentes normes qu'on fait en caractérisation physico-chimique, toujours la même chose avec les tests in vitro, in vivo également, hémocomp. En microbio, donc les familles des 11-137 à 17-664, et puis aux US, l'USP. Ici, donc, c'est la partie packaging et environnement, donc inclut les normes de la série ASTM pour les simulations de transport, si ça intéresse certains d'entre vous. Et puis la 11-607 pour tout ce qui est pelage, d'emballage stérile. Famille des 60-601 et 610 avec leurs normes collatérales et les parties spécifiques. La CEM, tout ce qui est fonctionnel, donc les règles particulières. Tout ce qui est appareil de partie réhabilitation, rééducation, etc., avec tout ce qu'on charge, par exemple, les lits, les fauteuils, on les pousse dans tous les sens pour les aspects mécaniques. Ça, c'est la partie radio. On fait ça donc pour 180 pays dans le monde. Donc, si vous avez un truc un peu bizarre, vous ne savez pas comment vous en sortir sur la partie radio, vous pouvez venir nous voir, on saura faire. Les batteries, bien sûr, donc dans les bunkers, donc aussi bien la partie européenne que la partie américaine, la 38.3. La cybersécurité, donc que ce soit pentest, vulnérabilité. On a 20 personnes en Allemagne qui sont dédiées au dispositif, à la sécurité, la cybersécurité pour les DM. on a un labo récent aux US pour tout ce qui est partie compatibilité IRM. Hein, quand vous avez un implant et que le patient ensuite doit passer une IRM, il faudrait qu'on vérifie que ça se passe bien. Donc, on peut le faire dans notre labo. Ensuite, donc, vous avez des règles particulières. Donc, on couvre l'international, si vous voulez, avec le schéma OC, CV Scheme en anglais. On est NRTL aussi, hein, l'équivalent des UL. Pour quand vous avez un produit qui doit être vendu aux US, eh bien, il demande que le site de production soit vérifié régulièrement. In métro, bien sûr. Pour les classes 1, on a une marque, le TUV marque. Hein. Peut-être vous reconnaissez ce petit octogone là, que vous pouvez voir sur des produits de la grande distribution. Ici, c'est où sont implantés nos laboratoires. Hein, donc, vous voyez, on est un peu partout. Évidemment, pour les Européens, on va plutôt travailler avec les Allemands, les Italiens. Pourquoi pas si on est anglais, donc avec nos labos anglais. Ici, donc, c'est la partie innovation, donc nano, par exemple, wearable, les robots, l'impression 3D, l'intelligence artificielle. On va, par exemple, on prévoit d'être organisme pour le IA Act, hein, bien sûr. Voilà, tout ça, on sait faire. Cellules souches également. Voilà, on a des spécialistes dans ce domaine-là. Bon, je vais passer là-dessus. Alors, l'autre chose intéressante, c'est les accès au marché. Donc, évidemment, les directives qui sont toujours encore appliquées, puisqu'on n'a pas tout à fait fini la transition hein, pour certains d'entre des produits. Mais on a aussi donc un approved body en UK, donc on fait le UKCA, le Japon, Taïwan, le programme MDSAP, on est Auditing Organization pour les pays du MDSAP, le Brésil, Australie, Corée, Malaisie, Singapour, Afrique du Sud, ça c'est nouveau, Ukraine, Afrique du Sud. Donc on est le premier organisme à avoir une reconnaissance de l'Afrique du Sud, donc pour nos certifications ISO 13485 qui permettent d'aller vendre plus facilement dans ce pays-là. Évidemment, sur les SMQ, donc je ne cite que la 9001 et la 13485. Et puis les autres, donc c'est connexes, on va dire. Et puis ça peut se combiner pour certains fabricants, une 27001, une 14001, évidemment. Voilà, donc je crois que j'ai couvert à peu près tout. Ici, ça montre les différents, sous forme de carte, les différents pays où on va pouvoir intervenir. Voilà. Et donc en vert, les 5 pays du MDSAP. Voilà. Et donc, pour résumer, on est indépendant, on couvre tous les dispositifs, on ajoute vraiment de la valeur pour les fabricants et on couvre oui, tous les dispositifs, je l'ai déjà dit, mais avec une force d'expertise donc importante et des ressources donc conséquentes. Voilà, j'espère que je n'ai pas été trop long et je vais passer la parole à Massimiliano.
Okay, can you see my screen? Can you see the presentation, the first page?
Yes, it's okay.
Okay,
Can start.
Okay, perfect. So, good afternoon to everybody. Sorry for the English. I studied French when I was very, very, very young, but actually I can understand something, but I cannot speak French at the moment. So I will give this speech in English. So the title of this speech that we agreed with Nicolas and Leah is this one. So how to avoid pitfalls with your usability report from the notified body perspective. Let's start with a brief presentation of myself. So my name is Massimiliano Folco. I am a biomedical engineer as a background. I am part of TUV SUD since January 2019. Specifically, I'm part of TUV Italia, so the Italian group, let's say, part of TUV SUD PS, product service. And I am specialized for non-active medical devices with several roles. I am authorized as a lead auditor for the main schemes, regulatory schemes. I am authorized as a technical documentation assessor for MDR, for sterilization and packaging, as a sterilization and packaging expert. And I'm also a trainer for usability and design control for TUV Academy. I am here speaking about usability because I had some experience during my, let's say, work experience previous than TUV SUD in a couple of big companies here in Italy. In the dialysis field, I always worked in the R&D department, product verification validation mainly, risk analysis, and also usability on active and specifically on non-active medical devices like dialysis lines, dialyzers, central venous catheters, feeding tubes, more or less this kind of also needles, this kind of devices. So I participated to some projects where usability evaluation was included. Before starting, I will show you this disclaimer, considering that I am part of a notified body, and the notified body has to be independent and impartial. So we present this disclaimer for saying that this presentation is based on the information that are available today and prepared to my best knowledge as subject matter expert. And the presentation is not intended to provide any consultancy, but only to provide an overview of the notified body perspective about the assessment of usability technical documentation for medical devices. This is the agenda for this speech. So we have three main points. I will start with a brief overview of the regulatory background and state-of-the-art standards related to the usability evaluation for medical devices, with a focus on Europe, of course, because TUV SUD is a European notified body. Then I will give you an overview of our internal template for technical documentation assessment report, specifically to the usability section. So this is the document that we have to compile, to fill in while we are assessing the technical documentation of MDR medical devices. So in order to give you an overview of what we focus on. And then we will have the main part is related to the common pitfalls. So let's say, so the common errors that we observe during the assessment of usability technical documentation. And then there will be a brief time for some question and answers, if any. Let's start from the first point. So regulatory background and state-of-the-art standards. We are TUV SUD. We as TUV SUD, we are a notified body designated by the European Commission. So the most important regulatory scheme that we have to consider is the EU Medical Device Regulation 2017/45, that will be abbreviated as MDR in the next slides. Then regarding the state-of-the-art standards, for sure we have IEC 6236-1, released in 2015, then corrected and amended in the following years regarding the application of usability engineering to medical devices. There is a guidance to this standard, so the part 2 of 62366, released in 2016. And then I included also ISO 11607-1 2019 related to the materials, sterile barrier systems and packaging system for non-active medical devices, because I have a slide related to the usability evaluation for aseptic presentation that is required by this standard. Then I included here we have a list, let's say, just for having an idea of which are the explicit references to usability aspects to be considered in the design development and in the preparation of the technical documentation for MDR medical devices that are described in MDR. This is a difference respect to MDD, where usability was not so explicitly mentioned, while in MDR we have several points, several requirements regarding explicitly to usability. Here, for example, we have GSPR, where GSPR stands for General Safety and Performance Requirements that are listed in Annex 1 of MDR. For example, GSPR 5 requires to eliminate or reduce the risks linked to the use errors, very important, considering the characteristics of the device, of the user environment, and of the intended users. Then, for example, we have other GSPRs that are requiring to consider risks deriving from the combination with other medical devices, are requiring to design information, for example, labeling, that have to be comprehensible to the users. And this is a usability aspect, of course, the fact that it has to be comprehensible. GSPR that is requiring a specific protection against the risks related to the lay users, so to the intended users category that that is called lay users, so the users that are not experienced and that probably require some kind of training, and so on. So this is just for having an idea of the fact that differently from MDD, MDR includes specific references to usability aspects to be considered in the technical documentation for medical devices. And this is one of the bases of our technical documentation assessment that we perform for the initial certification of medical devices under MDR, and also for the MDR surveillance activities that we perform, that we are actually required to perform from European Commission. For confirming the validity of the MDR certificates after the initial release. Let's move to section 2, the usability section of our TDR, that stands for Technical Documentation Assessment Report. When I start a technical documentation assessment for an MDR medical device, I have to take this template, so the template of technical documentation assessment report, and I have to start to fill in this template with the information from the technical documentation that I received from the customer. There is a specific section of this report that is section 5.1, where there is a list of the MDR requirements that have to be checked by the assessor with the goal is to verify that the medical device technical documentation fulfills the GSPRs related to the usability. So this is the first part of the focus of the assessor. So the focus is on the evidence of compliance to usability related GSPRs in the first let's say first step. Then the assessor has to also consider the state-of-the-art standards and the applicable requirements of the state-of-the-art standards. In this case, IEC 62366-1 is the main state-of-the-art standard applicable for usability. Even if in this report we do not have specifically the requirements of the standard to be checked with this checkbox, but we are required to do that, so to consider also those requirements for understanding if the technical documentation fulfills or not those requirements, and to raise deficiencies in case any gap is or inconsistency is observed. The assessment is done mainly taking the usability engineering file from the from the MDR technical documentation. So the first thing first document that I search in the MDR technical documentation when I start this to fill in this section is the usability engineering file that should be provided by the manufacturer as required by the standard 62366. Then the assessor pays special attention to the acceptability of the applied approach for usability evaluation, for example, full usability process or Annex C. We have other slides about this topic later on. The coherence between product risk analysis and usability risk analysis. Product risk analysis following according to ISO 14971, and usability risk analysis according to IEC 62366. Actually, usability risk analysis is a part of product risk analysis. What we check is that those part of risk analysis are coherent often usually we find the usability risk analysis that is embedded in the product risk analysis, but sometimes we have also separate risk analysis, and there should be coherence between the risk evaluation and estimation, evaluation, acceptability criteria that have been implemented and put in place for this analysis. Then the assessor pays special attention to the efficacy verification of the risk control measures related to the risk linked to the use errors. This means that during the usability evaluation process, risks related to use errors are identified and are mitigated with the risk control measures. The efficacy of the risk mitigation effect of this risk control measure shall be verified and validated by the manufacturer, and the assessor has to check that this verification, validation of the efficacy of this risk control measure has been performed. Then special attention to acceptability of the defined intended users and use environment, let's say the starting points of the usability evaluation of the device, and the acceptability of formative and summative evaluation strategy. So this is was the section related to our technical documentation assessment report and an overview of how we approach to this part of the assessment. Then let's move to common, let's say, common errors that we observe during our assessment for this section. The following slides will be organized as follows. On the left, we have some requirements that I included, and on the right, we have the common error related to these requirements. Here, I just selected some practical examples, some examples that maybe can be most critical or maybe not so obvious also from customer point of view, in order to have something to let's say significant to present to you. Okay, let's start from clause 4.1.1 of standard 62366-1. that requires that the usability evaluation process shall address user interactions with medical devices, including but not limited to transport, storage, installation, operation, maintenance, repair, and disposal. What does it mean? It means that the usability evaluation process shall consider the entire life cycle of the device. Not only the operation phase, so the phase where the device is used on the patient or anyway for treating the patient, but also the other phases where there is a user interacting with the device with a possible impact on the performance, on the safe use of the device. For example, we can have a complicated life cycle, more complicated life cycle for active medical devices, where you have a transport, storage, installation, operation, all those phases. Less complicated life cycle for single-use non-active medical device, where you do not have installation, do not have maintenance and repair. For other kind of cases can be, for example, the reusable medical devices, where there are a lot of operations that have to be done between one user and another for cleaning, disinfecting, and sterilizing the device, and maybe also for having maintenance and repairing of the device, for example, mounting the device. Common pitfall: usability evaluation considered only the user interactions related to the operation phase and not the entire life cycle of the device. In this case, something is missing in the usability evaluation. Not all the use interactions have been considered, and maybe not all the intended users have been considered. For example, transport people, the installation people, maintenance people, and so on. Clause 4.1.3 is related to the information for safety, so labeling elements used as a risk control measure. So when labeling elements are used as a risk control measure, the manufacturer shall submit this information to the usability engineering process to determine that the information is perceivable, understandable, and supports correct use by the intended users in the intended use environment. What does it mean? It means that when information for safety, so the labeling elements, are used as a risk control measure, they have to be validated for their risk mitigation effect, as I already said before. And the usability engineering process shall confirm that those information are perceivable, understandable, and supports correct use. So, in general, identifying a labeling element as a risk control measure is not enough. So the manufacturer has to validate the risk mitigation effect, the efficacy of the risk mitigation put in place by the labeling element in the usability evaluation, for example, during summative phase. Common pitfall is that usability reports do not contain clear evidence of the efficacy verification of the labeling risk mitigations linked to use errors. Of course, is all related to the use and to the use errors for the medical device under development. Clause 4.2 actually is quite straightforward. The results of the usability engineering process shall be stored in the usability engineering file. And in all the clauses of the standard, it is written that the compliance to the requirements of the standards is checked by inspection of the usability engineering file. So usability engineering file shall be present in the MDR technical documentation, but common pitfall is not always present. Sometimes only summative test reports or formative test reports are provided or are available. Maybe there is no the other deliverables that are required by the standards have not been properly documented. This leads to a deficiency report where the assessor has to ask, please provide us the proper usability engineering file and the proper deliverables required by the IEC 62366, that is state-of-the-art standard. Okay, let's move to training material and to training needs. Here we have a group of requirements from the standard that basically requires the following. The user interface specification for a medical device has to specify if a medical device specific training is required based on the characteristics of the device and on the intended users. In case of usability tests, in the usability test plan, the manufacturer shall specify whether a specific training is provided prior to test and if and which is the minimum elapsed time between the training and the beginning of the test. This last requirement is related to the learning decay concept. So where for, let's say, simulating the real world, where the training maybe is provided in one day and then the first use of the device will happen in more than 1 month, after more than 1 month. And then the standards requires with clause 5.8 to the manufacturer to design training material, so to provide, to design and implement a training capability for the expected service life of the medical device. So this means that if the manufacturer has identified, has defined that training is needed for the intended users, then training materials shall be developed during the design development phase, shall be validated, and shall be provided to the users for the expected service life of the medical device. Also in this case, for the training material, there is the concept of risk mitigation, because in the case that training materials are considered as risk mitigation for risk linked to use errors, they have to be validated for their efficacy as a risk mitigation in the same way of labeling material. This is a very important concept. Common pitfalls. Usability evaluation does not appropriately consider the training needs of the users. So based on the characteristics of the intended users, for example, let's think to lay users, no appropriate justification for the training needs for the training material that have been prepared is available. Usability reports do not contain clear evidence of the efficacy verification of training materials as risk mitigation, as I've said before. And usability test activities does not properly consider the learning decay related to the provided training. I know from, let's say, practical experience that it is not simple to consider learning decay based also on the availability of the resources of the participants to the test, to the formative evaluation, to summative evaluation, to a lot of other constraints, but at least there should be the evidence that justification or the assessment of the need for having learning decay or to simulate a certain learning decay shall be present in the usability documentation. Let's move to the concept of UOP, user interface of unknown provenance, that is defined in the clause 3.15 of the standard as follows. User interface or part of a user interface of a medical device previously developed for which adequate records of the usability engineering process of these standards are not available. So this is a user interface or a part of user interface which has been developed before the entry into force of 62366-1 2015 standard, so for which no appropriate records of the usability engineering process are available. The standard gives an alternative approach to the manufacturer for giving evidence of compliance of that device to the usability evaluation process. The alternative approach is described in Annex C in the 5 steps. The first one is related, requires to define the user specification as for the full usability evaluation process. Then the manufacturer has to review the post-production information related to usability, choosing an appropriate time period that is not defined in the standard. Then the manufacturer has to evaluate the available risk analysis, product risk analysis, for checking that all the risks, hazards, and hazardous situations related to usability have been already identified in the risk analysis, comparing what it is inside the risk analysis with the post-market surveillance data, post-production information of step 2. So from comparing the product risk analysis with the information coming from the field in the chosen period of time. Step 4, the manufacturer has to confirm that the implemented risk control measures related to usability and to the use of the device are complete and appropriate. Last step, overall residual risk evaluation has to be performed again. Common pitfalls. No clear usability evaluation approach described in the technical documentation. Usually we find that in the technical documentation, in case of Annex C, that is applied, for example, for legacy medical device, in the most common case, so in the most common case is that a legacy medical device has been submitted to this Annex C process, but it is not clearly described in the usability documentation, or maybe only some parts of the user interface are legacy and some other parts have been modified, and there is no clear justification of the user interface elements for which Annex C approach is applicable. No usability engineering file provided in case of application of Annex C. Also, in case of Annex C, the usability engineering file is required for collecting or referencing the evidence, the deliverables of a usability evaluation process. No appropriate justification for the time period considered for the evaluation of the PMS data about usability. As I've said, there is no specific requirement, but the manufacturer has to select an appropriate time period. Of course, if the device is on the market since 15 years, choosing only 1 year is not sufficient. So there should be an appropriate time period to be checked for PMS data about usability. No clear comparison between usability PMS data and the existing use risk analysis. So there should be clear criteria for comparing the PMS data and the data coming from the field about usability and the existing use risk analysis. Last slide is related to different standard, ISO 11607-1 for non-active medical devices. So usability evaluation for aseptic presentation is required in section 7 of this standard related to the sterile barrier system of non-active medical devices. Aseptic presentation is defined as the transfer of sterile contents from its sterile barrier system using conditions and procedures that minimize the risk of microbial contamination. So transferring a sterile device from the sterile packaging, so from the sterile barrier system, with minimizing the risk of its microbial contamination. The sterile barrier system is defined as the minimum package that minimizes the risk of ingress of microorganisms and allows aseptic presentation of the sterile contents at the point of use. So the aseptic presentation is embedded in the definition of a sterile barrier system. So when you have sterile barrier system, you have aseptic presentation, at least for the contact between the sterile device and the not sterile part of the sterile barrier system. At least this is applicable. Then sometimes we find let's say justification from the manufacturers that states that aseptic presentation is not applicable to their devices, but at least for this aspect, so the contact between the sterile device and the not sterile part of the sterile barrier system, the aseptic presentation is applicable, even if the device is to be used in a not sterile field. At least an evaluation of the aseptic presentation shall be done. Section 7 of ISO 11607 requires to perform a documented usability evaluation to demonstrate that the sterile contents can be aseptically removed from the sterile barrier system for presentation. A basic concept behind this request is also the fact that the sterile barrier system, the packaging of the device, is to be considered part of the user interface of the device. So in addition to the device, you have labeling materials, training materials, and also packaging as part of the user interface of the device, for which usability evaluation shall be performed. This standard requires to have a usability evaluation specific for the aseptic presentation of the sterile contents when removed from the sterile barrier system. The usability evaluation shall include an assessment of the ability to identify where to begin opening, the ability to recognize and perform the technique required to open the sterile barrier system without contaminating or damaging the contents, and the ability to subsequently present the contents aseptically. These are three typical tasks that are required to be included in a usability evaluation, if possible, in the overall usability evaluation of the product, in order to have a complete usability evaluation, starting from the unpacking of the device until its disposal, so following the entire life cycle of the device. Common pitfalls are the following. Usability evaluation does not consider the packaging system as part of the user interface of the device. The user risk analysis does not include considerations about aseptic presentation. So these are two, let's say, basic errors. So missing to recognize that the packaging system is part of the user interface to the device, and missing to consider aseptic presentation as an input for the user risk analysis. No clear justification for declaring aseptic presentation as not applicable, as I explained before. The formative and summative evaluation does not properly include tasks related to the aseptic presentation, and the formative and summative evaluation does not properly consider conditions of use, because when the tasks related to the unpacking, so to the removal of the device from the packaging, this phase is performed in a certain conditions. For example, the operator can wear gloves, can wear gowns, can do the removal in a certain environment that can be more stressful than other, or can be contaminated on certain surfaces respect to other. So these are all aspects that have to be considered for this phase. Okay, this was my last slide. Thank you very much for the attention. I hope that I was clear for this presentation. If you have any question, please, you can write or maybe say also in French, and I think that someone will translate to me.
Okay, thank you, Monsieur.
Thank you. Hello.
You're welcome.
Any question in the room? No? I have one.
Okay, I have a question. When you were talking about use-related case and PMS, you talk about the time period when you evaluate this case. I had a question. If every year we have a PMS, a SUR, etc. So in this document, if in this document we evaluate the usability related case, and that this document is the entry point for the update of the user analysis, and the user analysis is the entry point of the final usability report, is it a must-have to talk more about this case in the usability report, or no?
Thank you for the question. Actually, is not let's say mandatory to. So what you have described to me could be acceptable. It is also, as we have also to consider which kind of device, the risk class of the device, but the usability engineering file is a way for collecting the evidence that give evidence of compliance to the standard IEC 62366 requirements. Then the evidences can be, let's say, present. It can be available in different documents. If you use PSUR for PSUR, sorry, for giving evidence of the evaluation of the PMS data about usability, could be one way for doing this kind of analysis. The time period that has to be considered, it depends basically on the history of the device. So if you give me evidence that the number of complaints, also the volume of the sales during the, let's say, during the time period that you considered, with the maybe comparison with also with the past, a brief comparison with the past, are always stable, we can also, so I think that we can also, so it is acceptable also to have a shorter time period. It is not, let's say, black and white situation. So it's something that has to be evaluated based on the history of the product on the market, and also on the history of the complaints of the product. So if you have an history of the product where you have a few complaints, a stable sales volume, the period can be reduced. If something happened, or if you have a time period where the sales are going up and down, and maybe there was 1 year where a lot of complaints have been received for one reason or another. In that case, maybe I expect that also that the period can be enlarged for considering these variations. You're welcome.
Any other question? Online?
No.
I have one for you. So how can you do to evaluate the quality of the training that you provide to the participants for the summative evaluation, for example?
Actually, it's not the quality of the training, but it's the efficacy of the training to provide to the users the knowledge and of about the task to be performed in a safe way. So the effect of the training material for the risk mitigation effect of the training material can be seen during for example, the summative test, when you observe the user doing performing the tasks that have been planned for that summative evaluation, and observing if any user error happens. In the case if a user error is observed, then the user will be interviewed, and then the root cause of the user error has to be investigated. If you as a manufacturer will understand that the user error is caused by the training, for example, by an element of the training, in that case, the training material has not been effective, or has been maybe dangerous in the case, because the knowledge was not appropriate, and the user came to an error during the test. So basically, it's not the quality of the training, but is the capability of the training to give the elements to the users to perform correctly the tasks for the interaction with the medical device in a safe way. This is the usability is related to safety, basically. So the safety of the medical device more than performance. So the safety is the starting point, and so then of course there is also the performance. But the standard 62366-1 is focused on the safety. I don't know if is it clear? Do you need more details?
It's okay for me. It's okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.